You've felt it, haven't you? That quiet, persistent question in the back of your mind. Is this real? Or am I just hoping it is? Not the loud kind of doubt, not panic, something softer, more dangerous. The kind that shows up when you're alone at night replaying conversations, wondering why certain moments felt so intense and others felt just slightly off. And here's the part that might sting a little. You're not confused because you're bad at reading people. You're confused because something in you already sees the truth, but you're not sure you're ready to accept it. So before we go any further, if this feels a little too familiar already, just quietly hit like, maybe subscribe. Not for me, but so you can come back to this when the feeling returns. Because it will. Now listen carefully. When a person's love for you is real, truly real, not performance, not convenience, not attachment dressed up as something deeper, it doesn't leave you constantly guessing your place in their world. But that doesn't mean it feels easy either. That's where most men get it wrong. You've probably been taught to look for obvious signs, big gestures, words, reassurance, consistency that feels clean and predictable. But real emotional connection, especially from someone who actually matters, rarely shows up in ways that neat. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's inconvenient, sometimes it even feels a little uncomfortable. And that's exactly why you miss it. Because you're not just looking for love, you're looking for certainty. You want to feel chosen in a way that removes all doubt, no second guessing, no emotional risk. But real love doesn't remove risk. It exposes it. It makes you aware of how much you could lose. And that awareness, that tension you feel when you start to care more than you expected to, that's not a flaw in the connection, that's a signal. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people won't tell you. Not every strong feeling means someone loves you, and not every real love feels the way you imagined it would. So the question isn't just, do they love me? The real question is, are you paying attention to the one sign that actually reveals it? The one thing people can't fake for long, no matter how hard they try. Because once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. And it might change how you look at someone, permanently. There's a moment you've probably experienced, even if you didn't give it a name. You're sitting with this person, maybe in silence, maybe in conversation, and suddenly, something shifts. Not in them, in you. You feel slightly more exposed than you expected to feel. Not because they've asked anything direct, but because their presence doesn't let you hide in your usual ways. And you might not admit this out loud, but part of you starts adjusting. The way you sit, the way you speak, even the things you leave unsaid. Now here's where most men misunderstand what's happening. They think, I must be nervous because I care. Or worse, I need to act more confident so I don't mess this up. But what's actually happening is far more revealing. Real emotional connection, when it's real on the other side, has a way of gently disrupting your internal autopilot. Because you're not being managed, you're being seen. And being seen, in the psychological sense, isn't always comforting. It removes your ability to stay in performance mode. Let me explain it in a simpler way. When someone doesn't truly care, you can predict them. You can control your emotional exposure. You can stay slightly guarded and still feel in charge of yourself. But when someone's love, or emotional attachment, is real, there's a consistency in their attention that doesn't let you stay half present. They notice things you didn't think mattered, not in an invasive way, but in a steady, quiet awareness. And over time, you start realizing something strange. You're not trying to impress them anymore. You're trying to be understood correctly. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because manipulation thrives in uncertainty, but real connection creates reflection. And here's where it gets emotionally complicated. The sign you've been looking for isn't loud reassurance. It's not constant affirmation. It's not even agreement. It's how they stay present with you when you're not performing anything at all. Not when you're interesting, not when you're attractive, not when you're on, but when you're just there. Unfiltered, slightly tired, maybe even emotionally quiet. If someone's attention softens, not disappears in those moments, that's not casual interest. That's emotional investment that has gone past surface-level attachment, and you'll feel it before you understand it. A strange sense of safety, mixed with vulnerability you didn't plan on showing. And that's exactly where most people start to doubt it, because it doesn't feel like the movies. It feels like being quietly known, and that can be unsettling if you're not used to it. But that unsettled feeling? It's where the truth starts to surface. You know what people rarely admit? The hardest part isn't recognizing when someone doesn't love you. It's recognizing when they do, but it doesn't feel the way you expected. That gap between expectation and reality, that's where most of your confusion lives. Because you were taught, in one way or another, that real love should feel steady, clear, easy to interpret. But real emotional attachment, especially the kind that lasts, has texture. It breathes, it shifts. It reacts to who you are in real time, not who you're pretending to be. And this is where something interesting happens in relationships. When someone's feelings are not real, their behavior often becomes optimized. Predictable kindness, timed attention, controlled distance. You can feel the pattern if you're honest with yourself. But when it is real, there's a kind of emotional sloppiness that shows up. Not irresponsibility, not chaos, something more human. They might say things in ways that aren't perfectly polished. They might struggle to express exactly what they feel. They might even pull back sometimes, not because they don't care, but because they do, and it overwhelms their internal balance. And instead of that being comforting, it often confuses you. Because your mind starts asking, if they really care, why does it feel uncertain sometimes? But uncertainty is not always absence. Sometimes it's intensity without full control. And here's where I need you to pay attention closely. There is one sign that quietly separates emotional convenience from emotional truth. It's not how much they talk to you. It's not how often they show up. It's what happens when you change emotionally. When you're not giving them the version of yourself that's easy to handle. When you're quieter than usual, or slightly distant, or even emotionally complicated in a way that requires patience instead of admiration. People who are only partially invested will drift, subtly, gradually. They won't announce it, they'll just reduce emotional effort without explanation. But someone whose feelings are real will recalibrate. Not overreact, not chase, not perform panic. They adjust to you. They stay mentally present even when the emotional atmosphere shifts. And that's the part you usually overlook, because it doesn't feel dramatic enough to notice. But real love isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just persistence without pressure. A steady return to understanding you, even after moments of distance or confusion. And I want you to sit with this for a second. Have you been looking for proof in intensity when the truth was actually showing up in consistency of response to your real self? Because if you have, you might have missed something important already. And once you recognize it, the way you interpret every past interaction starts to change. There's a strange thing that happens when someone genuinely cares about you. They start noticing the version of you that doesn't ask to be noticed. Not the confident version, not the social version, not the one you carefully present when you want to be liked. The quieter one. The one that shows up in small pauses, in how you stop replying as quickly when something is on your mind. In the slight change of tone when you're tired but pretending you're fine. Most people don't register that level of detail. Or more honestly, they register it but they don't stay with it. And that difference matters more than you think, because emotional attachment isn't proven by attention alone. It's proven by attention that persists even when it becomes inconvenient. Let me say that in a more human way. Anyone can like you when you're easy to be around. But real emotional investment shows itself when you're not easy, and they don't disappear. Not physically, not emotionally, not subtly distancing themselves to protect their comfort. They stay in contact with your emotional reality, even when it's not rewarding in the moment. And you feel it in small ways. They ask questions that don't lead anywhere obvious. They remember things you said casually weeks ago. They don't rush to fix you, but they don't abandon you either. And this is where men often misread the situation, because you might think, if they cared more, they'd do something bigger. But emotionally mature care doesn't always escalate into grand gestures. Sometimes it expresses itself as restraint, as patience that doesn't demand you to be different than you are in that moment. But here's the part that complicates everything. When someone stays emotionally present with your less polished moments, it can make you uneasy because it removes your usual control. You can't earn their attention with performance anymore. You can't reset the dynamic just by becoming more impressive. And that creates a quiet internal discomfort. Not because something is wrong, but because something is real enough that it can't be easily managed. And your mind naturally tries to regain control. So you start analyzing, overthinking, looking for inconsistencies, trying to find proof that what you're feeling isn't as deep as it seems. But often, what you're really doing is resisting the simplicity of something that doesn't fit your old emotional patterns. Because if it is real, then you can't reduce it to a game anymore. You can't fully predict it. You can't fully control your position in it. And that lack of control doesn't always feel like love at first. Sometimes it feels like exposure. But that exposure is exactly where emotional truth becomes visible. Let me tell you something that might not sit comfortably at first. People don't reveal their feelings the way you hope they will. They reveal them the way they can afford to. That's a big difference. Because you might be waiting for clarity, something clean, something unmistakable, something that finally removes all doubt. But real emotional attachment doesn't usually arrive like a clear statement. It arrives like behavior under pressure. And pressure is where truth leaks out. Not the pressure of conflict or drama, the quieter kind. Like when you need something emotionally, not just practically. Like when your mood shifts and you don't explain it. Like when you become slightly harder to read. That's when you start seeing what someone actually feels. Now pay attention here, because this is where your misunderstanding might have been hiding. If someone is only interested in you at a surface level, their engagement depends on your clarity. When you're easy to understand, they stay close. When you become emotionally layered, they drift towards simplicity, away from you. But when someone's feelings are real, they don't move away from your complexity. They lean into it, even if they don't fully understand it. Not perfectly, not always gracefully, but consistently. And consistency here doesn't mean constant communication or constant affection. It means something more subtle. It means they don't emotionally abandon you when you become harder to interpret. They stay mentally with you, even when they don't have the perfect response. And this is where things get psychologically interesting, because most men interpret emotional depth through reaction. If someone reacts strongly, they assume it means more. If someone pulls back, they assume it means less. But emotional reality doesn't always follow reaction patterns. Sometimes the deepest feelings show up as hesitation, not distance, as careful responses, not silence, as a slower emotional rhythm, not absence. And if you're not paying attention, you might mistake that slowness for uncertainty, when in reality, it might be restraint. A kind of internal self-control, because the feelings are actually real enough to matter. And here's the part that often gets overlooked. People who don't care deeply don't spend energy regulating their emotional expression around you. They just show up as they are and leave as they feel. But when someone cares, they become aware of the impact you have on them. And that awareness changes their behavior. Not into perfection, into consideration. And you can feel that difference in the way they respond to you when nothing is being asked of them. Not when you're entertaining them, not when you're giving them attention, but when you're simply existing in their emotional space without effort. That's where truth stops hiding. And the uncomfortable realization starts forming quietly in your mind. Maybe I've been measuring this all wrong. There's a point in some connections where you stop asking, do they like me? And start quietly wondering something heavier. Why do I feel so emotionally seen and still unsure? That contradiction is where most people get stuck. Because you can have moments of real closeness, real laughter, real warmth, even real vulnerability, and still not feel fully settled. And your mind starts trying to solve it like a puzzle. If it feels good sometimes, it must be good overall. If it feels confusing sometimes, something must be wrong. But human attachment doesn't behave like a simple equation, especially not when it's real. When someone's emotional connection to you is genuine, it doesn't just show up in how they treat your best version. It shows up in how they respond to your emotional shifts. Not dramatic ones, not obvious ones. The small internal weather changes, when you're slightly withdrawn but still present, when your energy drops but you don't explain why, when you're not asking for anything but your emotional tone changes anyway. People who are not truly invested tend to ignore these shifts unless they benefit from responding. They stay aligned with what's easy, but someone who cares starts adjusting to what's real. And this adjustment is rarely loud. It's often quiet enough that you almost miss it. A slower message instead of disappearing. A check-in that doesn't demand anything back. A moment of patience where frustration could have easily replaced it. Not perfection, not constant emotional availability, but a willingness to stay emotionally connected even when the situation stops being convenient. And I want you to notice something important here. This kind of behavior doesn't come from obligation. It comes from emotional relevance. You matter in their internal world enough that your state affects how they orient themselves. And that doesn't always feel flattering. Sometimes it feels like responsibility you didn't ask for. Sometimes it feels like emotional weight on both sides. And that's why people often misread it. Because we tend to associate love with ease. But real attachment introduces complexity. Not because something is wrong, but because something is real enough to have consequences. And here's the quiet turning point most people miss. You stop feeling like you're being evaluated and start feeling like you're being considered. Not as an idea, not as a role, but as a person whose emotional state actually matters in their decisions. And once you recognize that shift, you begin to notice something else too. The uncertainty you've been feeling might not be the absence of love. It might be the presence of something you haven't fully learned to trust yet. And that realization doesn't give you immediate comfort. It gives you clarity, which sometimes takes longer to emotionally settle than doubt ever did. There's a moment, usually quiet, usually unplanned, when everything you've been analyzing in your head suddenly stops feeling theoretical. It becomes personal. You're not asking, "What do they feel?" anymore. You're asking, "What have I been ignoring while trying to figure this out?" And that's where the real shift happens. Because the sign you've been searching for isn't something dramatic. It was never meant to be. It's not the perfect message. It's not flawless consistency. It's not even the absence of doubt. It's what remains when doubt enters the room. Let me explain that differently. Anyone can be present when things feel good. Anyone can say the right things when emotions are aligned. But when emotional tension enters the space, when misunderstanding happens, when silence stretches a little longer than usual, when connection becomes less smooth, that's when you see what's real. Because real emotional attachment doesn't collapse under mild uncertainty. It reorients. It tries to find its way back to understanding you, even if it doesn't do it perfectly. And that effort, not intensity, not perfection, but returning, that's often the clearest sign you're dealing with something genuine. Not because they never pull away emotionally for a moment, but because they don't stay gone. And now I want to bring this back to you for a second. Not the situation, not the other person, you. Because somewhere along the way, you may have started equating love with emotional certainty, with never wondering, never questioning, never sitting in that uncomfortable space between "I feel something real" and "I need proof of it." But real connection doesn't eliminate that space. It teaches you how to exist inside it without losing yourself. And that's not easy. It challenges your need for control. It challenges your need for emotional guarantees. It even challenges your past experiences that taught you to expect inconsistency as the default. But here's what I want you to take with you, if anything stays with you after this. When someone's feelings are real, you don't always feel constant reassurance, but you do feel something more subtle over time. You feel returning presence. Not perfection, not intensity, just a steady coming back toward you even after distance, confusion, or silence. And that kind of presence changes something in you too. You stop chasing certainty, you start recognizing patterns, and slowly, you begin to trust what doesn't need to be forced. Because real emotional truth doesn't demand that you stop questioning. It just becomes something you can no longer fully deny.